Guys, it's official. UFC 254 is a lightweight fan's dream. We got Cucuy versus the Diamond, most likely in the co-main, but we're going to talk about that fight right now. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, we have a yet another exciting lightweight matchup that's going to take place now, it looks like, at UFC 254
Absolutely.
in October.
Yeah, it's hard to beat the lightweight matchup that they already had slated for that one with Gaethje and Khabib, but this is kind of a perfect matchup right before the main event. And given the fact that Khabib and Gaethje and all these guys, or Khabib and Ferguson, that tend to back out of fights last minute, it's perfect to have interchangeable guys.
You know, that was the first thing that popped into my head was this is not so much a lightweight tournament.
Right.
Because I don't think that even if, let's say, for example, there's a bunch of different scenarios that could happen, but even if Cucuy was to get past Dustin the Diamond and then, you know, make his call out to Khabib or the winner of Khabib Gaethje, should that winner be Khabib, I'm not quite sure that Khabib is going to be chomping at the bit to get right in there with Ferguson, especially since he would be 1-1 in his last two. I think he's got his sights set a little bit more on George St. Pierre, but you never know what can happen. And as you said, I think this is almost one of those situations where you make it a super exciting night.
Yeah.
As you say, it's moving day at 155.
Right.
And then if something does fall out, you know, who knows? Maybe the Khabib-Tony matchup gets made by accident after all these years of trying to make the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, they owe us that fight. I personally think that Tony versus Khabib would be the greatest fight that Khabib could do to settle his career. I get the money purpose and the legacy purpose of fighting George St. Pierre instead, and I'm sure that's like the favorite in his mind and probably the UFC's mind, but the fans deserve Tony versus Khabib. And I think, you know, I don't see Dustin backing out. I damn sure don't see Gaethje backing out of the biggest fight of his career. And I'm pretty sure both of them will make all the fighters will make it to their fight. But it is one of those things that sits in the back of your mind, and it could be fight week when we have to change plans.
And with this whole COVID thing, you know, that throws another scenario, another possible reason for a pullout that's almost, well, not completely, but pretty much beyond your control.
Right.
You try to keep your camp small and try to keep things under wraps, but you never know when that's going to hit you.
Yeah, and I'm drawing a blank on the fighters that got pulled from a card just recently, but
the biggest was Gilbert Burns.
Well, that one, but there was one that happened. It was supposed to be. It might have been that Ion Cutelaba versus.
Yes, remember, that was the one. Yeah,
he got pulled.
It was the rematch,
COVID, and then they had it scheduled, and the rematch scheduled. He tested positive for COVID. Then they rescheduled it again for the card that happened last weekend or the weekend before, and one of his coaches tested positive. So
no way.
So he got thrown off the card, even though he's like, I'll fight without anybody in my corner.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about just yourself, but your team as well. And I think Tony's one of the only guys that really trains like isolated all the time.
Very much like, what was the Rocky III nemesis?
Mr. T?
Mr. T. What did he go by in that movie?
Clubber Lang.
Like Clubber Lang style in a sweat gym, like screaming while he does pull-ups type of situation.
Yeah, but everybody else is kind of in the mix in these MMA gyms, and like Dustin Porrier, he could very well catch it just going to practice.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, let's talk about that matchup, assuming that it happens, which we think it will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will.
You know, the first thing that pops in your head is common opponents.
Right.
And you think of Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje got knocked out by Dustin Porrier. And obviously Tony Ferguson lost what was a pretty dominant fight against Justin Gaethje. That said, this is not going to be one of those MMA math type situations.
Definitely
this is going to be a
not.
totally different fight. And I think it's really a very interesting matchup. How do you see this fight playing out, and where do you see it playing out? More in the clinch grappling exchanges, possibly on the ground, or do you think this is just an all-out war?
You know, this is one of those ones that you can't possibly put Tony Ferguson in the ring or in the cage and expect it not to be a crazy show. And then you throw him in there with just a monster, somebody who's been in there with all of the best fighters and usually puts on a fantastic performance in Dustin Porrier.
Right.
This one's, you know, Dana keeps saying that Costa versus Adesanya might be the fight of the year. this one could very well be the fight of the year. And it's on such a stacked card, it might not even be the fight of the night. I mean, it's probably right now my front runner for fight of the night for that stacked card. But who knows, with that, as deep as that card is, it might not be.
Yeah, well, the thing is that with Dustin Poirier, as of late, his boxing has really been improving. He's been working with Dia Davis down in Florida, the former pro boxer, really high-level guy. And we know Tony likes to engage.
Right.
And Tony does do a lot of damage, and he keeps a crazy pace. Mm-hmm. That said, he does leave himself quite exposed sometimes for big shots.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, if Dustin can shut the lights out on Gaethje, he certainly has the ability to shut the lights out on Tony.
I don't know.
But it's if anybody could do it with a good power shot and clean boxing, I think Tony's going to bring the type of fight to Dustin that might lend to Dustin landing some good counter shots.
Yeah.
Or might lend to Dustin getting overwhelmed. I guess that's what we'll have to find out.
It's hard to say. It's hard if you're a betting man to bet that Tony Ferguson will ever get finished in his career. I think Dustin Poirier is a pretty good grappling artist and a submission artist. And I think Tony Ferguson is obviously great from his back. Neither of them really mind going to the ground. That being said, I don't see this fight going to the ground. And I also think they're both as tough as old leather boots. So they're both probably going to go the distance with each other. I think you're going to get I'm guessing it's a 3-round fight. You're going to get a 3-round war, which those guys, you might as well just tack on a couple extra rounds for them, because that's going to be an insane. Yeah. I feel like it's too good of a fight to be 3 rounds.
With the pace those two guys can keep, 3 rounds, they could just be getting warmed up.
Right.
Tony Ferguson will likely go run a half marathon after the fight's over with.
Yeah, and also will probably run to the hospital. But I think because of what we said earlier in the beginning of this, that the potential of one of them stepping in or, to the title fight, or if one or both of the fighters back out between Khabib and Gaethje, there's so many names I get confused. But they're all 4 going to be training for a 5-round fight.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question that all of these guys are going to be going in there with the 5-round mindset, even though Poirier and Cucuy are not going to be scheduled for 5 rounds. Right. And I'll say this, if Tony Ferguson can come out there and prove that what happened with Justin Gaethje was just an off night in what was, a 10-plus fight, I think it was 13-fight win streak that he had prior to that loss. If he can get past that, prove it was an off night, beat a guy who knocked out Gaethje, and re-solidify himself, in my personal opinion, Dana White's going to be more apt to make Tony Khabib than he is to make Khabib GSP, for 2 reasons. One, because obviously GSP Khabib is a mega fight, so you have that big dollar figure there, but so is Tony Khabib. That's a mega fight that everybody wants to see, and you don't run the risk of getting burned twice by George St. Pierre, whereas if he can go in there, get that 155 fight against Khabib, go in and knock off the most dominant 55er in history, and then sail off into the sunset, it kind of puts Dana and the crew and the matchmaking crew in a tough spot. I think they would rather see Ferguson versus Khabib. Do you agree or you disagree?
Well, it's hard to say either way. Given if you look at history, either way Dana gets burned. GSP takes his title and runs with it, or Tony and Khabib, he tries to make that for I'm pretty sure the 6th time, and then he doesn't get that fight. So who knows? Maybe, crazier things can happen in the sport, but those are 2 situations where Dana and the UFC generally don't have the best luck. So maybe the luck will rub off in the form of a crazy Irishman who's always one tweet, one press conference, one anything away from a title fight. And let's just say he doesn't want to give GSP that opportunity. He doesn't want to make Tony and Khabib for the 60th time, and then he gets Conor in there for the title shot against Khabib.
Well, I think Khabib would accept a fight against Conor a lot easier than he alludes. Because first it was, go win 10 fights and then I'll think about fighting you again. That was obviously absurd.
Right.
And now he said, basically go beat Dustin Porrier again and I'll fight you. Well, Dustin's got business with Tony, but I think that Conor McGregor comes in there, he takes a fight. If he wins the fight and he wants Khabib, he gets the rematch. And I think Khabib sticks around for it.
Yeah, and I think if Khabib gets through Gaethje, George St. Pierre will start the training camp and the weight cut and everything like that, and make his way down there for the legacy fight. But Khabib did say anybody that beats Dustin Poirier, not just Conor, anybody who beats Dustin Poirier can get a shot at the title. So, that leads you to Tony Ferguson. It leads you to, everybody wants to see the Poirier McGregor rematch, even though it was kind of lopsided. I think years later in a different weight class, a weight class that they both truly belong in, is the best fight that we would see between those two guys.
I'm very bearish on Khabib having 2 more fights. I know Khabib is not driven by money. He's a very religious guy. He's a family man. His dad had his plan set out for him and whatnot. But Khabib is in his early 30s. Mm-hmm. He's very much in his prime. Maybe he hasn't even reached his full potential yet. And I think there's more than 2 exciting matchups, one being Gaethje and the other being St. Pierre or whoever it may be sometime early next year. There's more than those 2 matchups left for him. There's more than 2 exciting things to see. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a weight class jump. Maybe something exciting happens and somebody falls, into his lap. But I just personally think that we're going to see Khabib Nurmagomedov step into the octagon at least 3 more times.
I can see that. And who knows? Maybe he'll try to if he gets past Justin and then is able to get past George St. Pierre, maybe he tries to get to 35-0,
right.
And that gives us 5 more fights, and there's a ton of fun ones all around the 155 and of course 170, like you're saying. Some people say he walks around at 195, right around 200 pounds, so that's a huge weight cut. And I think if he was able to step back and kind of, it's a great way to go about fighting it later in your career after you've already established yourself, you've already been a champion, is to come back and fight once or twice every couple of years. Look at Brock Lesnar's now in the discussions again for the top 5, the sweepstakes in the heavyweight division. It's one of those things where if Khabib sails off into the sunset after the early parts of next year, and then a couple of years later he has the itch to fight again, he'll probably get a title shot, an immediate one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see it going any other way.
Same situation as George St. Pierre when he jumped in against Michael Bisping.
I think a lot of times when guys say 2 more and I'm done, what they really mean is I'm done with the constant 12 months a year, 365 days a year, 24/7 grind.
Defending the belt.
What I'm not done with is continuing to train, continuing to live my life, enjoying things, letting my hair down a little bit, and just keeping my eye out there and see when something pops up that interests me or a favorable matchup comes to be. George St. Pierre absolutely set that precedent. He saw, and no slight to Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping deserved to have the belt. He deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
But that was a good matchup for George.
Right.
I don't think George would be chomping at the bit to come in and fight Israel Adesanya or Paulo Costa, the winner of that fight, necessarily.
Definitely not, yeah.
So, these guys they'll quote unquote retire, like Floyd Mayweather quote unquote retired.
Yeah,
George
a dozen
St. Pierre.
times.
And what that means is I'm going to keep training. I'm going to stay in shape. I'm going to have a couple of those slices of tiramisu that I love. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to keep my eye on the division.
Yeah. I think that's smart.
Or divisions around my division.
Yeah. Obviously he's not going down, but I think 170 would be a great place for Khabib. And, Usman is a dominant champion. People would love to see that fight. I don't think it's the money fight that some of the other matchups are, but it could definitely, there's a lot of fun for him to have at 170.
Absolutely. And going back to Dustin and Tony Ferguson, let's say Dustin, I presume that he's going to be the underdog. And I think rightfully so. I think Ferguson.
It's probably going to be close.
Yeah. I think they're going to give the slight edge to Tony.
Yeah.
I think the odds makers are going to say, look, you can't, in MMA, it's, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
But not if you're Tony Ferguson. It's like, what have you done the last decade?
Right.
And you had a bad night against a guy who, by the way, is fighting for the belt. Right. And they're saying is the champion's toughest test. So I think that they're going to favor Tony slightly, but let's say that Dustin Poirier pulls the upset, or perhaps he's even the favorite. Let's say he wins the fight, and let's say Khabib wins the fight. Do you see a feasible argument to be made for Dustin to get a rematch against Khabib because we saw that fight and it really wasn't very competitive?
No, it's hard to just discredit somebody like Dustin Poirier after all he's done, and if he wins against Tony Ferguson, he should be the front runner. It's just not how the sport works, and everybody kind of knows Khabib's laid out his plan. If I were Dustin Poirier and I won this fight, I would call out Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And calling out Conor McGregor is generally the dumbest thing you can do post-fight because you're not going to get that fight. It's so rare to get that fight. That's like winning the lottery.
This is one of those situations where he can get it.
But he's one of the only ones that can get it. And I think Conor would take that fight because I think Conor thinks he can win. Probably would be the favorite in that fight. And it would be a big fight. But most people, what was it, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was, even people, I'm pretty sure some females were calling out Conor McGregor. It's just like everybody was calling him out and everybody was getting turned down, and it was a sign of weakness. And this is one of those opportunities where somebody could call Conor out and they could get it.
I'm with you 100% on that. I always get annoyed, or when Conor was in the mix and fighting regularly, when people would, call him out after a win. I'm like, that was such a waste of a call out. You're not going to get that fight. You have 0% chance of getting that fight. This is a little different, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, they have history. They even though Conor won that first fight, I think people would presume that would be a well-contested fight at 155, especially if he gets past Tony. And number two, everybody else's dance card is filled up right now. So we thought that it would be Masvidal or Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
Those two have their second fight, presumably in January.
Yeah.
So they're filled for now, and they those guys don't fight every 2 months, so it'll be probably 6 months before either one of them fights again after January. So you're talking about mid 2021. So they're out of the question. Now, Khabib and Gaethje, they have business. Presuming Khabib wins, he's going to want St. Pierre or Ferguson, depending on the winner of that fight.
Right.
So what does that really open up for Conor? That's an exciting matchup. I think it opens up Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, Dustin Poirier, and what's the official date on that, on the mega card of 2020?
I think it's the 24th, October 24th. Yeah, if I'm wrong,
it'll be here in no time.
Yeah.
And let's just say he wins, and then Conor, he calls out Conor like we're saying he should. Maybe they try to, if there's a quick turnaround, which generally there's not a quick turnaround if you fight Tony Ferguson, but for the sake of the argument, let's just say that there is a quick turnaround. Maybe they stick Conor and Poirier on the same fight card as Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz in case there's a backing out. Just like,
how would you like to be the one leading the discussion between those four gentlemen as to who's going to be the main event and who's going to be the co-main event?
Yeah. Well, there's a title on the line.
I think there would be some serious arguments there.
Yeah, Conor probably wouldn't take that, but there would technically be a title on the line. Dana did say that George wants to defend the BMF title, and he wants to do it against Nate, and Dana pretty much, in fewer words, said he would let him do that. Yeah. So there will be a title on the line. I'm assuming it's a 5-round fight. I'm not the biggest fan of that being the next move for either of those guys, but I'm more than happy to watch it. And I think that Nate Diaz always deserves a shot at a title that's titled the BMF, and George Masvidal has the right to call out who he wants to call out. And I think it's kind of cool because it's not one of those call outs out of hatred. It's one of those things where they kind of did each other a solid, and George is only giving him this rematch because the ref stopped, or the doctor stopped it.
Right.
And he feels like, if there was a few more rounds, maybe things would have got interesting, but the first 3 rounds were not competitive.
No, and the thing too is that Gilbert Burns is getting the rightful shot he deserves in December. Yeah. So the rematch there, and I was for that. As big of a star as George is, and as much as I like him, and as much as I think is, if you step up to the plate on less than a week's notice and fight and cut all that weight, regardless of outcome, if you go out there and just get knocked out in 3 seconds, I think you deserve a rematch because of what you did. And what you proved yourself as a company person. And what we've seen from Dana is if you if you go a mile for him, he'll meet you.
Right.
He'll
He kind of
halfway.
save a show.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
So I think George does deserve that rematch, but I don't think he deserves it before Gilbert Burns does, because Gilbert did everything right. I mean, dominated Tyron Woodley.
Right.
Was slated to go against Usman, and then through no fault of his own got COVID. So I think that I agree with you. I don't think that the Diaz-Masvidal was really what I wanted to see either of them do next. I was kind of hoping to see the trilogy with Conor and Nate Diaz, but I think, Sean Shelby and Dana White, they're smart guys, and they know that there's literally no expiration date on the Nate Diaz Conor McGregor trilogy. It's
Right.
like a
What's that?
like canned soup that's like good for 27 years. That fight is good for as long as either one of them can still stand on 2 feet.
Absolutely. And, my premier fight for George Masvidal is would have been Colby Covington.
Yeah.
I think that's the fight to make. I think that one's so fun. That one without, that one's going to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys, no questions asked.
Yep, and no title on the line. But
Right.
presuming that George has the BMF and him and Colby go again.
Colby deserves a shot at that. If anybody, there's a few people on the list of BMFs in the UFC, and Colby Covington is damn sure one of them.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so much fun at 170. And then, the name that I'll always bring up, because how could you not, is Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
What happens with him?
Yeah, he tweeted at Gamebred, and I love what he's saying. He's like, why would you call out the number 12 guy if you're supposedly the BMF? And it was a good jab as far as Twitter
Basically said
goes.
it's two journeymen fighting for a fake title.
Exactly. And Leon is kind of that guy that everybody at the party is avoiding.
Yeah.
But
I've seen him fight in person. I saw him fight Rafael dos Anjos in San Antonio, and man, he's good.
Oh, very good.
RDA is, one of the best.
There's a reason people are avoiding him.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those. It's sort of like there's a few guys in the UFC that just get avoided. And nobody mentions their name. Leon Edwards is that guy at 170.
Yeah, and so we do have a bit of a log jam at 170. So maybe what you said is they give Gilbert Burns his shot. Let's presume Covington gets past Woodley. I think that we can all probably agree that he's favored to do that.
Right.
And then you give Covington the next shot at the winner of Burns and Usman.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and then you let Masvidal, call in a 3-piece with Leon Edwards. I mean, there's unfinished business there.
Yeah, and I think with the backstory, you could definitely have some fun with that one. So much fun at 170. So much fun at 155. This stacked
early prediction, not winner of the fight. Early prediction: does Dustin Poirier and Cucuy happen as well as Khabib Gaethje as planned?
Yes, I think
agree.
I think Justin Gaethje showing up for that fight, even if he gets COVID and gets bit by a shark, he's showing up for that fight. It's going to happen. He'll probably figure out a way to do a false negative test if he has to, if he catches COVID. But no, I think this is a big opportunity for him. He does have the best style of anybody out there in the 55 division to give Khabib a hard time. I think this is the fight to make. It's a perfect way for the 155 division to kind of end the year.
Yeah,
it's going to answer some questions for us. And Tony Ferguson is one of those guys that he hates to lose more than probably anybody in the sport. And I just see him getting back into his winning ways on this one. That's my early prediction.
I think he's going to run from California to New York and back to get conditioned for this fight.
Absolutely.
Probably twice.
And like we were saying, my early prediction, if I'm going to go balls to the wall with it, this goes the distance.
I think so.
Dustin and Tony, that is, and it's only a 3-round fight, so there's going to be gas left over afterwards. Mm-hmm. So look for a great post-fight speech, no matter who wins that fight. I do see this one continuing and happening on this stack card.
Absolutely. And we'll break down this card in further detail as it gets closer. There's so much good action between now and then.
We'll need a whole hour for that card, probably.
Seriously. We're going to have to charge the batteries on the camera for that one.
Absolutely, y'all.
But guys, thanks again for listening. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out where you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and please drop a comment on top 3 matchups you like to see at 170, top 3 matchups you like to see at 155, because we just ran through a bunch of them. We just kind of wound up down this rabbit hole of crazy hypothetical fights, but some of them could happen. Some of them probably won't happen, but I want to know what you guys think. It kind of gets our brain,
And I think this will be one of those days where, or after the fight, there'll be after that fight card, there'll be potential matchups that you never saw coming, and now you can't live without them.
Yeah, and I'll just leave you with this. Thank you. Where does Charles Oliveira go from here? Is he slated? Because I feel like he's the Leon Edwards of 55.
Yeah, I tell you what, 70 and 55. It's great if you're at the top of the top, but man, if you're like in that 5 to 10, get in line.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, thanks so much. Let us know what fun matchups you want to see at 55, and extra credit if you write 72.
Yep.
Have a great day, guys.
Enjoy the rest of the week.